It says, My Last 28 Years in the Prayer Room. And I read that title and I thought, wait a minute, IHOP Kansas City's only, 13, almost 14 years old. What are we talking about? And she says, the year was 1983. I was 23 years old. It's like some of you guys in this room. And attending Mike Bickle's church called South Kansas City Fellowship. There was a core of us that attended the daily prayer meetings back then. We met 3 times a day at 6 a.m., noon, and 7 to 10 p.m. every night. I also worked as a teller at a bank in Overland Park, Kansas. So every day, what I would do would be to go to the 6 a.m. prayer set, head to work, run back over to the noon prayer meeting during my lunch break, then go back to work, then head home, quick changes of clothes, and head up to the 7 to 10 p.m. prayer meeting. This was my life, and I loved it. At the time, I could not even think of doing anything else. And I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot. And yet, that's why she's being used by God now. I mean, 23 years old, she's getting gripped by God to understand the importance of intercession. She says, I remember being there the day Bob Jones, and Bob Jones is one of the prophetic words that we heard last week in regards to the prophetic mapping seminar. Bob Jones is like the grandpa of the prophetic prayer movement in America. I think he's, 83, 84 years old. He's getting up there, but he is a powerhouse for the Lord still. And she says, I remember being there the day Bob Jones came up and said, 24/7 house of prayer. The singing will never stop round the clock. God is releasing the songbirds. At the time, I could not imagine doing anything else. A small group of us would talk about this over coffee frequently, saying, what would this look like? How could this be? 24/7 worship? Will I get to do this full time? Will this be my job? And this is Julie Myers when she's 23 years old. I think it is an awesome thing to watch the spoken prophetic word become a reality. This is exactly what I've watched these past 13 years. I literally saw the prophetic word become a reality of which I am actively involved in. I have watched my children grow up in the house of prayer. I have watched their hearts awaken to his love at young ages. I have watched them become excellent in the word of God, and also excellent in their skill as prophetic musicians. Now I'm watching for the second half of the prophetic word to become a reality. For I remember the day Bob Jones stood up and said, out of this 24/7 house of prayer will come a day when no disease known to man will stand. We are so close to this. I can feel it. I can see it in the distance, but it's getting closer and closer. I tell myself, I am so pleased that I get to do what I do. I get to praise my bridegroom. I get to sing to my Father and experience the touch of the Holy Spirit. This is my calling. This is my heart. And this is my glory, to awaken the dawn with my song. To sing praise. To worship and to prophesy that which is on the Lord's heart. I have literally seen the first part of this word come to pass. And you know, all of us have too, watching what God has done through a man and a woman, Mike Bickle and Diane Bickle, and a small core team of people who prayed 6 a.m., noon, and 7 to 10 p.m., night after night after night. There was only a handful of them. And most people looking in would say, why are they wasting their time? And yet, looking at what God's done, using a house of prayer there, and I'm sorry, but my heart is so tender as I was reading this and seeing what God has done and how he's moving and birthing houses of prayer in the nations of the earth. And we're so close to Jesus' return. And she says, I've literally seen the first part of the word come to pass. And yet the no disease known to man will stand is coming quickly. And the glory of the day when wheelchairs are lifted at the front of the stage because the lame are now leaping. It's coming. It's coming. God is stirring the hearts of his Levites all over the world, from nation to nation. He loves it when the fragrance of intercession and praise arises. I had a dream about this very thing that I am reminded of as God is setting his watchmen on the wall to cry out day and night, to never keep silent and give him no rest. I am undone. This is the dream. We move heaven when God stirs our heart to pray day and night, Isaiah 62. And we entwine ourselves with his purposes and are faithful to the invitation to intercede. He acts on behalf of those who wait for him. This dream is a picture about how faithfulness, especially in intercession, moves God's heart. Psalm 132, 3-5. I want to read that. And guys, if I cry, you're just going to have to just bear with me. Because I believe God is so up to something. And even in this little house of prayer, that we get to be a part of what he's doing in the end of the age. Psalm 132, 3-5. Surely I will not go into the chamber of my house, or go up to the comfort of my bed. I will not give sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids until I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling place for the mighty one of Jacob. I had a dream. An angel took me into the room of a man who was deep in sleep. We stood together at the foot of his bed, so the angel could show me how this faithful person spent even his unconscious hours. I could hear the man praying while he was asleep. Every time he would roll over in his bed, he would say, "Abba, here I am. Here I am, Abba, I love you." I looked up through the ceiling and saw a vast angelic army. Together, the angels seemed like an ocean of brilliant, radiant light. It appeared that they were pulsing and trembling, just waiting to break in. They were waiting to be released by the call of the angel who had been led into the room. He was in great anguish because he earnestly desired to give the call they were all expecting. But he said one sentence, "It's not quite time yet." I kept looking at the heavenly host. I could see ladders. I could see lamps. I could see the expectation, the anticipation, and how strongly they wanted to break in. The angelic multitude was getting ready to burst in, not with a simple entrance, but with a flood of divine activity. Only the single angel held back the imminent breakthrough. It was not quite time for him to release them. There was something yet to be completed before the breakthrough, before it could happen, though I was not shown what it was. I noticed the Lord standing at the head of the man's bed. I was able to feel his gaze of tender kindness and hear his gentle whisper over the man. He said, "So many people said they would do it, and they never did, but you really did it. You really did it." The Lord's affirming voice, affection, and kindness to the man were due to the man's faithfulness in continual day and night prayer, even in the mundane things of life. This man did not seek fame and fortune. He stayed steady, lovesick for God, and unoffended day by day. A tear came from the corner of the Lord's eye. He was deeply moved by this man's faithfulness. The tear fell in slow motion and broke into 100 tiny splashes on the man's pillow. It was beautiful to watch. This display of passion was a side of the Lord I had never seen before. From my vantage point, I noticed the man's room was as bright as day, even in the darkness, because the host of heaven were so close to breaking through. The Lord looked at me and said, "We have heard many pray. Take us up. Instead, tell the faithful ones, heaven is coming down. Heaven is breaking in." And the Lord added, "And tell them I am undone." And as I read this dream, and I thought about Julie Myers as a 23-year-old, giving her life to prayer, even in the midst of working. Not everybody's called. In fact, most people are not called to be a full-time prayer missionary. But here's this woman who's working, and she's, excuse me. It's going to be emotional tonight for me. What can I say? Here she is as a 23-year-old giving herself to day and night prayer when there wasn't even a house of prayer and people weren't saying it was cool to pray day and night. And she was doing it for years, actually for 14 years before the house of prayer was birthed in Kansas City. And you know, it's the faithfulness of just putting your face down. And each one of you, wherever you are, God is looking for that faithfulness and for you to be talking to the Father. And I thought in his sleep, in the dream, he's going, Abba, Father. You know, and praying. And I know, you know, even in praying in the Spirit, we should go to sleep praying in the Spirit. We should wake up praying in the Spirit. We should spend our time talking to the Lord throughout the day and spend our time. It's not a waste of time. And this other dream goes hand in hand with this. And what I feel like the Lord is just saying to our little company here, even as we're about to launch into a place of in a week packing up and saying, well, here we go, Lord. And the Lord had given a dream to our company that we were getting into a white van. Hannah had a dream, and it was like going like this on a river, and I won't go through all the details, but it was getting pretty crazy and wild, and we began to pray in the Spirit. The Lord just gave peace to the group as it's this wild, crazy ride, and anyway, we landed in a great place, but actually, I'm not sure what all happened in the dream, but I know that's where we are. We're in this great thing and landing in a great place. What that looks like, I don't know exactly, but God does, and we're on a journey, and I am so excited. I am so excited. So I want to read this dream. And I hope, is this okay, guys? Are you getting something out of these dreams? Is it ministering? I hope it's ministering to your heart as it did mine. And especially look back. And most of you know the history of what's happened at IHOP Kansas City and how that it's streamed into some nation throughout the day of a 24-hour span. It's hitting the nations of the earth. I think it's through God TV and web stream. I mean, it's like the nations of the earth. It's just all over the place. They're using and what God is doing. And the Lord is birthing companies, and not just, you know, this house of prayer, but praying churches and praying communities around the world. And it's so powerful in what God is doing with young and old. And so I want to read this dream because this is what I really feel like the Lord is speaking tonight. The dream says, and some of you guys might have already heard this dream. I think it was just posted this past week on Elijah List in a couple of places. But I had heard about it, but I had not read it until today. And the title of it is, I Love to Tell the Story. God is stirring, and this is Julie Meyer again. She'd had the dream. God is stirring his people to pray. God is raising up houses of prayer, prayer movements, and ministries who realize the great need for prayer and having foundations of intercession firmly established before ministry takes place. Before ministry takes place. That's a big before, okay, guys? I won't go into that, but that's a big before. We need to make sure we're praying before we get out and go do. People are bowing their knee in reference to our holy God, believing he will give more when we simply ask.